Welcome back to the Article 18 podcast. This is Steve G. Jones. I'm News Director at Article 18. And I'm delighted today to be joined by my colleague, Nazanin Ansari-Tari. So, Nazanin, I hope I pronounced your surname sort of not too terribly.
Yes, sure.
Great. Maybe I just wondered whether you could start with just introducing yourself a little bit. Tell us about who you are and your background.
Yes, sure. But first, I would like to say hello to everyone who is watching, and also thank you, Steve John, for having me. My name is Nazanin Ansari-Tari, and I live in London. I'm married. I work with Article 18 since 2019. And I've been a Christian since I was 8. And yeah, that's it.
That's great. And can you just tell us a little bit about what you do at Article 18 and how you came to start working with us?
Yes, so I think I met the director of Article 18, Reverend Mansour Borji, years ago before I started with Article 18, and I was involved in working with converts, especially with refugees in Austria when I was in Austria, because I moved then to England. But before in Austria, I got in contact with Brother Mansour. So we talk about the opportunities to work together. I think 2019 was just the right time to start.
Great. And you're involved in what we call documentation here at Article 18.
Yes.
Can you just tell our listeners a little bit about what that is and what you do?
Yes. So documentation and research is mainly collecting data, but it has different layers because it starts with interviewing people or with collecting reports of different incidents. But then you have to go through details and what really happened, not only like date and time and when and where somebody, for example, experienced human rights violations, but also what kind of torture did they experience, and also what kind of pressures did they have to endure. So we go through all of them, and we try to collect as much information as possible. And especially when we have an interview and we get the opportunity to talk to people firsthand who have experienced persecution inside the country, they explain in detail from the arrest to the release, and also the verdicts they receive. Sometimes they go to the Court of Appeals. So we go through all the procedures. And also there's a lot of emotional stuff involved, like the family, people who have children, who have watched their parents being arrested. So as said, different layers, a lot of information and a lot of experiences that we ourselves at documentation have to digest.
Yeah, and you, I think you have a legal background, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. So I studied law in Austria and got my diploma there. And then when I moved to London with my husband, I wanted to also do some studies here. So I studied here and did my bachelor. The subject was philosophy, ethics, and religion. So, and I also was a student in theology at Park Theological Center.
Yeah. And you mentioned about the interviews that you conduct, and we do this thing at Article 18, which is called witness statements. We work together on that. I help with that. But I wonder whether you can explain, I think we've done over 25 now of those together over the years. So just explain to our listeners a little bit about what the witness statements are and why we do them.
So whether somebody experienced persecution, a persecution that was caused by the government, whether they experienced it just recently or years ago, we try to get the connection and speak to people. Sometimes it's just a single person, sometimes it's a couple, and sometimes it's a whole family that we're in contact with, and they explain from their perspective what they went through. So um, sometimes it's just the father of the family who was arrested, but we also hear from their children that they watched their father being taken away in handcuffs and blindfolded, or they experienced a lot of fear when they met the agents who were armed. So we start where the families first kind of experienced this persecution and got to know what it really means to be a Christian convert in Iran. So, like in regard of how the government sees them. So they start by telling us how they came to Christ, but also how they got involved in Christian activities and how they got arrested. And then we move on to detention, because there are different phases that the arrested people go through. So there's the arrest, and then it's detention, and then the interrogations. They have to deal with a lot of interrogators sometimes, and very often they get to be held in prison. So they talk about the experiences they had in prison. Maybe they have been moving around in different cells, which is also a kind of torture, because you never kind of get to know other cellmates a little bit more or make friends. And then we move to how they actually were able to submit the bail, because this is also a very big problem in Iran. The bail amounts are very high, and it's a struggle to kind of being able to release the person you love from prison. So this is the next part, and the next section will be court. So they have hearings. Sometimes they have a lawyer, sometimes not. It depends of if the lawyer would accept their case, would accept to defend them. Sometimes they say no because it's just too tough, and they think that, okay, I probably gonna lose my job if I would defend a Christian convert. And after that, we speak about the verdict. A lot of unjust verdicts that I've heard about and that I've read when I got the verdict sent over. And sometimes as said, they appeal the verdict, and many of them say that, well, the Court of Appeals is more like a confirmation court than really a court of appeals. So after that, a lot of Christian converts, because they have no choice of living in Iran, it's like, there's this big kind of mark in their file. So when they want to apply for a job, it's like, oh, okay, you're a Christian convert, or you have a verdict, so you have been sentenced to like imprisonment. Why? So because they have like these problems, many of them say that it's just not possible to live a normal life, and they decide to leave, or to be specific to flee the country, because they are not only fleeing the very hard situations that they endure as Christians, when they have when they meet people at job who does not accept them, who bully them, but they also flee this kind of not normal life, and the situation of not being a normal citizen, but a second-class citizen.
Thank you. Yeah, there's so much, isn't there, that you write about, and I know that when you're doing these, I mean, you must talk. I wonder what the record is that that you've spoken to someone for. It must be hours and hours and hours, or over days, right?
Yes.
So
Yes. Yes.
so much information, and we go back and forth, and you have to bear with me in that regard a lot when it comes to the English translation. But I wonder whether there is one or two stories that you'd like to just tell our listeners about that really struck you? I know for me, having worked with you on this, that there are certainly common themes. I think you've talked about some of the ways in which the process sort of seems pretty similar in a way: conversion, arrest, court, appeal, and fleeing, pretty much. But obviously, each of them, as well as having the commonality, they also have specificities. So I wonder whether you could just talk about just a couple, one or two that stick with you or that come to mind.
Yes. I mean, documentation and research helps a lot to find trends, and I've seen a lot of similarities in the different kind of witness statements that I've been through so far. But I think there was this family that was very special to me because not only one member, but all four members of the family have suffered directly from persecution. So we have not published this witness statement yet, but I hope that we'll publish it soon. So this family of four, father, mother, and two children. The children, one of them was going to university, and one of them was still at school. So the younger one, who was still in school, she told me that she was pressured a lot from her teachers after her father was arrested and detained, and he also had to go to prison because he had a prison sentence. She was pressured a lot from her teachers to kind of admit that she's still a Muslim, and that she that she was kind of put under pressure to attend Islamic religion classes, although she said that I had told them that I'm Christian as well, like my parents, and she said that I also told them that because my father is going to prison for being a Christian, I think this should be accepted, that I'm a Christian and I shouldn't be kind of pressured to attend Islamic classes. But she was, I think at the end, she had to change school. She had to go to another school. And unfortunately, it became so bad that she said also in another school, because they had her file, and they knew about the history. She said at the end I had to leave, so she was never able to finish school. And at the end, also the whole family they fled the country and left Iran. And that was something that really hurt me when I was listening to her, because she was so young and she was being really strong, and she was standing up for her faith, but she paid a very high price, because as an adult, I'm sure it's very hard when you lose your job, when you have to go through so many hardship. But as a child, when you think that, okay, by not finishing school, I have lost so many opportunities. It's not like I just can change my job or try to find another job. You have no diploma, you have no education, so this would lead her not to be able to attend university, and this would lead her to go to work very soon in a young age, and she would suffer from a lot of physical problems due to the stress that she had to endure during the time her father was away, and also when they had to leave their home.
Thanks for sharing that, Nazanin. And I think as well, I was going through a few of the statements earlier, just looking back over them, and for me, I think that for the men, sometimes there are beatings involved, which are quite difficult to read about. For the women, there's the additional pressure. A couple of them, maybe you can speak to that, being a woman. Is there one or two cases you could perhaps reflect on?
Yes. I think for women, one case that we published, so I can say her name. It was Shadi Noveri. and she was arrested. I think it was at her workplace, and I can remember exactly when she was telling me about the whole body search at prison, that it was so bad and it was such a unusual thing to experience, that she said I just burst out in tears. And because normally when they do the body search, you have to be completely naked, and they would touch you. And I know it was a female officer, but still it's really uncomfortable. And normally they do the whole body search, um, usually just to find drugs, because they want to make sure that you are not smuggling any drugs inside the prison, or you're not carrying anything with you. So because she had to do the interrogations outside prison, there was kind of a lack of space, and then she had to return to prison regularly. She would experience this body search every time. So she said once I just burst out in tears, and I asked this female agent, "Do you think I'm a criminal? Are you acting like that? Are you doing this to me because you really believe that I am a criminal?" Because I am not. And she said that even the agent, the female agent, she was kind of, in shock of all of a sudden. It was kind of like she would realize, like, what am I doing here? What am I doing to this girl? So yeah, I think that was something that I will probably not forget very soon. Yeah.
I think as well, I've also heard on a number of occasions survivors saying that the psychological torture that they experienced was even worse than physical threats. Maybe, in fact, maybe can you tell our listeners a little bit about the types of psychological torture that Christians experience inside prison?
Yeah. Well, there is another case that had, a variety of tortures. That was Iman Shahvari. You can also find that on our website. I can remember type of torture that he went through was kind of through different temperatures, because he was once in a cell that was like that had no AC. It was really hot, and he said that it was so difficult just to breathe, because it was just so hot. And then he said that all of a sudden they turned on the AC, and he said in the first moment I was like, thank God, they are kind of being kind to me, and they have turned on the AC, so it's going to be a little bit cooler. But then he said that they kind of increased the level, and it got too cold. And he said that he had to start to do, exercise to keep himself warm. But at the same time, so this was something, it was physical, but it was also mental, because you had to mentally prepare yourself for a very extraordinary condition to be in for a while. And then he also experienced the physical torture during interrogation when he was beaten up. And not only that, he would also experience a very, I think, hard to endure type of torture for men, when he was told that, you know what, if you are not going to cooperate, we will bring your wife and your family members here to this prison. You know, the prison in Iran, and I think anywhere, it's not a very comfortable environment to be in, and especially in Iran, there are certain standards they just do not meet. So imagining that your wife will be in a prison for male prisoners with very very kind of not normal interrogators, and people who you think that they can't be normal human beings, who would look at your wife, who would probably try to approach her. So that was a kind of a torture that he said this was when I started begging them that, you know what, I don't want my wife here. I don't even want the right to have visitors. I don't want anyone to come here and to visit me or to bring for me medication or anything. So this was also another type of torture when you realize that, okay, it's not only me, it's going to be also my family who will suffer. Um, but I mean, there is this kind of financial torture. Very often, people say that they ask for very high amounts of bail, and then when you start telling them that, you know what, I don't have that much money, they become really mean and they say that, okay, you should have thought about this before converting to Christianity. So it's also the financial pressure that they want to use to kind of force you to regret that, you know, you have converted to Christianity.
I think some of the other things that I hear often or read often are having the light on always in the cell,
Yes.
the noise of a fan is there, and things like this that just seem to be fairly common ways of getting under the skin. Blindfolding
Mm.
happens as well. But I
Yes.
think from your side, Nazanin, I know with your colleague Sarah, our colleague Sarah, that you're both involved in this work together and doing so many interviews and having to listen to these stories. I mean, how do you cope with that?
Well, it's not easy, of course. I mean, there are cases that you kind of think about for a longer time, especially when children are involved. You know, there was this case. We never kind of mentioned it anywhere, and also the parents didn't want anything being published because, you know, children grow up and maybe they would be too ashamed of what has been published about them. But there was this case when a little girl realized that, oh, my father is being taken away, and although she was like in school, she would start bedwetting. So um, I think that was a tough one for me because you don't know for how long she was dealing with it, and also in children the impact lasts longer than in adults normally. But I think a way to cope with this kind of, you know, cases and this kind of incidents is to remember that um, there is a reason why they pay this price, and it's a good reason,
Mm.
and it's worth it. I've heard this so many times, and I think what I've heard has been such a blessing to me and has helped me to cope with all this kind of difficult information. That this is the price they wanted to pay. This is the price that they were aware that probably they will be, you know, persecuted and they will have to pay. But um, I hear so often that even if I knew how hard this would be, I would still, you know, go the same path.
Mm.
So this helps a lot to know that, okay, it hasn't been only suffering and being kind of destroyed. It's also a blessing because it makes you stronger,
Mm.
and it helps you to feel, you know, um, you have been doing something for the future generations. You have taken your steps so that one day they will live in freedom in Iran. They will get to choose who they want to believe in without being persecuted. So I think this is very often what helps Sarah and I to think that okay, we should keep on our eyes on Jesus Christ, because He's also the one who heals. There are a lot of people who offer professional help, like psychologists, and that's great. And we should use the help that we can get. But at the end, the one that really can heal a lot of wounds that cannot be seen or cannot be discovered by even professional people, that healer is Jesus. And I think keeping our eyes on Him helps a lot, and knowing that He is familiar with pain and suffering. He's familiar with persecution, so He's not just an observer. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. And I think so. Another of our colleagues is going to be doing a paper, actually, or is doing a paper on the impact of children. So I think that's going to be hopefully really helpful as well. I wondered whether we've talked about how, unfortunately, so many of these people, in fact, I think everyone that we've done a witness statement of has left the country and won't be able to return in the near future until things change in Iran. But I wondered whether we could just spend some time just discussing about the situation of refugees, because it wasn't ever really our work initially. The work was documenting the persecution inside Iran, but obviously a lot of people actually have even said that the situation outside Iran for some of them has felt even worse. So I wonder whether you could just explain a little bit about what you do with refugees as well, and what the situation looks like.
Yes. Well, the situation of refugees, like the refugees who have left Iran because of their Christian belief, um, it's kind of like an extended persecution for them. So people who are outside Iran and they have applied for asylum very often live in the country where there are asylum seekers for years. Like I know people who have entered Turkey as a single young man, and now they are married and they have a child and they are still in Turkey, not certain what will happen to them. And for them it's like, okay, we were not allowed to work as Christians inside Iran. Now in Turkey it's the same. We were not allowed to express our Christian faith freely in Iran. It's kind of the same in Turkey, because very often they explain that, okay, when I am wearing a cross necklace and they see it, they all of a sudden, do not behave as they did before. So when they discovered that, especially that I was a Muslim, a former Muslim, and I converted, all of a sudden, they treat me totally different in a negative way. So I would say that for them, it's really just, the persecution in a different light or in a different setting. Um, but yes, it's really difficult to also hear that in Turkey, that people have or had a lot of hope and still have hope, but you can see that it's kind of fading, because it seems like it's an endless waiting time. I think many people, especially, were very disappointed when in 2018 the UN office was closed in Turkey, and a lot of them who have been recognized as refugees by the UN have been rejected later by the Turkish Immigration Office. So that was a big disappointment. And they say that, a lot of refugees say that, even if I show them my verdict and I tell them that, there have been people from the Iranian government who have, went to my parents' house and asked about me. So if I would be deported, for sure I will land in a prison. Still, they kind of just reject you. And very often I hear the sentence, it seems like they have already issued the verdict before they have even, heard your story, or they do not really listen. So in their mind, they know that, okay, I will reject you. You're just a Christian convert. So yeah, it's really tough.
And from our side, as I said, we didn't enter the work intending to focus on refugees, but increasingly it
Yes.
has become the focus of our work collectively. And I know your work. So I just wondered whether just tell us a little bit about what we do, what you do regarding refugees at Article 18.
Yes. Well, there are things that are very similar to the work that we do, in documentation. We listen. This is like the first thing we do. We try to be really good listeners. I've heard so often people saying that, it's so good that, for once I can just tell my story and somebody is listening to me actually. So this is one of the things we do. We just try to maybe a little bit help them with the burden, just to be good listeners. And then we have on our website a page dedicated to especially refugees in Turkey or asylum seekers in Turkey, who can contact us, and they can fill out the form. They can explain what situation they're right now in. Very often people have the urgent need for campaigns, or maybe just a news article, so that others know that, what, I am now in a deportation camp, and I don't know when or how I will be sent back to Iran. So sometimes this is what we deal with, but mainly I would say that the page that is dedicated to the asylum seekers in Turkey is the way where people can get information, can get awareness. Sometimes people don't know their rights, or they don't know, even what kind of procedures they have to expect, because it's very unusual that in a country every case, or very often cases, are handled in a very different way. There are people who say that I've been here for like 10 years. They haven't interviewed me once. And then you hear from people, I've been here like just for a few months, and they have already rejected me. So it's also a good source to know that, okay, what are my rights, or how should things, just move on. Is it okay that it's like that, or that? Very often they also tell us about that. I think that they did not understand me because of the language barrier, and they are not sure if they can ask for a different translator. Sometimes because the translators maybe are not Iranians. So this is also a difficulty, and it's a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nazanin, for the time and explaining what you do here. I think I'm sure you, like the rest of our team, we talk about refugees so much. I think one of the things that we'd really love to see change is for anyone who's listening, we might be able to help in this regard. We have only around, I think, 50 cases or something like that where we've documented the persecution they experienced. We can testify that these people are true Christians who've suffered persecution and are at risk of persecution, and we just long to see them resettled. But yeah, so thank you so much, Nazanin, for joining us here on the Article 18 podcast, and we hope our listeners will join us for the next one.
Yeah, thank you.